President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the Oval Office more than a week ago is likely to haunt him for some time to come. A moment of deja vu for our first citizen this week when the lights were dimmed at the Infrastructure Development Conference in Cape Town. And lots of conversation about Elon Musk's satellite company Starlink, but he too won't be in the White House for much longer. I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo, and this is your Week in Politics.
Many people believe that we went to Washington to discuss Starlink. That is not so. The issue of Starlink never even came up in the discussions that we had in the White House with President Trump, notwithstanding the fact that Elon Musk was there as part of the US delegation. So it wasn't discussed. The process of having low orbit satellites providing Wi-Fi and internet connectivity is known in South Africa. We've been through that. And there are quite a number of other companies, Chinese companies, European companies, and Russian companies, and many others, and local companies who are interested in getting into that space.
Billionaire businessman Elon Musk has resigned from his position in the Department of Government Efficiency this week after clashing with US President Donald Trump over spending policies. The Tesla owner took to his platform X, formerly known as Twitter, to thank Trump for the opportunity to reduce wasteful spending.
Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight.
Musk, who began scaling back on his work as a special government employee last month, is, according to the Financial Times, being off-boarded. The world's richest man was also the subject of debate here at home after Communications Minister Solly Malatsi appeared before Parliament's Portfolio Committee to respond to a proposal to relax BBBE policies in the sector. Communications Minister Solly Malatsi was at pains to explain that the issuing of a draft policy directive which allows for satellite companies like Starlink to operate in South Africa without giving over 30% ownership to previously disadvantaged groups has got nothing to do with the trip to Washington led by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Malatsi told the Portfolio Committee that last week's Gazette was a culmination of a process which began in earnest late last year.
Different people are always going to have different views about the timing. And I would really like that in that conversation, we are mindful of the steps that predate the visit that took place to Washington. To be mindful that the work that culminated, even engaging with IASA as early as the 4th of October, would not have been done that way if all of a sudden there is a realization that we have to gazette by Friday.
But most members of Parliament were not convinced.
Was any deal cut in America by the leadership? And I've got a clear-cut clarity from the African National Congress that there was no deal cut clearing the path for any Starlink regulations, as the public is calling it. So very, very clear, the African National Congress is clear. Our laws are sacrosanct. There is no backdoor to gaining entry. Anyone wanting to gain entry into this country, especially into the ICT sector, which is a sector that is most disadvantaged, as Honorable Matafa said, perhaps the most, must come to the front door. There is a 30% that is in place. So I would I'd like to ask the Honorable Minister, because we must not be naive to avoid the politics. The party that he represents, that is the Democratic Alliance, have they had any conversations with Elon Musk and Starlink that, whilst the minister has gone on pains to indicate that this is not, this is coincidental, I think South Africans need a very clear answer.
I think you're trying to effect amendments using a ministerial policy directive to the Electronic Communications Act as well as to the ICT sector code, which is a product of the BBBE, Act? Because in your policy directive communication, you say that you seek to align the two. I'm interested as to what would the consequence of that alignment look like? How do you achieve alignment outside of changing legislation? Because the ICT sector code, as much as it might be a regulatory instrument under the Department of Communications, it's a product of the PBBE Act. And to give a ministerial directive on the ICT sector code, which belongs to that specific act, which is regulated by the Department of Trade and Industry, confuses me.
When are you reversing this unlawful gazette? Who pressured you to do this? You are under oath. Who pressured you? Who instructed you to do this? Because you seem like an intelligent man. Maybe in the words of Rupert, you seem like a changed man. Who is pressuring you to do this?
One DA MP pushed to remind the committee that the policy directive was still a draft and is going to be subject to comment.
What Minister is saying is that there is going to be 30 days from the day of the Gazette for any interested party to make comments. And all of us in this room are choosing to ignore that little fact, because we want to use this as this process for political expediency.
Malatsi closed off his responses to criticism from MPs by saying this.
I can't dissociate myself from the fact that the leader of my party was part of the delegation to the US. And I'm a proud member of my party. I'm not apologetic about that. And I belong to a party that is part of this administration. And this administration, through the president and the other members that were in that delegation, have consistently said there was no discussion whatsoever about Starlink. There wasn't. Some of you have shared this sentiment in there. So as to why you would want to implicate me into conversations I wasn't part of in order to shape a narrative of bullying, I don't know what that seeks to achieve.
When asked about what independent watchdog IASA had to say about his draft policy directive, Malatsi conceded that the Chapter 9 institution advised him to rather amend the Electronic Communications Act, which stipulates the 30% equity requirement. But in that same response, the body also said that Malatsi is entitled to issue a gazette. The legal notice is now open for comment. During a post-cabinet briefing, Presidency Minister Khumbudzo Ntshabeni stressed that Starlink was not a topic of discussion in Washington.
I don't know how South Africans try to listen. We have never considered Starlink. I have never said that. I said South Africa considered developing or introducing satellite technology in the country. In 2022, as a minister responsible for communications and digital technologies, I gave a directive to IASA to undertake a market study for the introduction of geosatellite technology and LEO satellite technology. Geostationary satellite technology is the geographic stationary, earth stationary technologies. They are above those ones that you don't see. LEO is the low orbit satellite technologies, which are called the LEOs. And that market study was supposed to check what should be the regulatory framework for South Africa when that technology gets introduced.
The South African delegation's performance during a working visit to the United States continued to be dissected. Agriculture Minister and DA leader John Steenhuisen spoke to Newzroom Afrika about how he doesn't believe the African Growth and Opportunity Act, known as AGOA for short, will continue in its current form. The 25-year-old agreement offers South Africa and other countries from the continent duty-free access to the US market.
When we broached the subject of AGOA, it was made very clear that that is a creature of Congress and that we'd have to obviously engage with Congress. My personal view is I think that AGOA may well still be on the boil, but it is certainly going to be different to the AGOA that we know from the past.
The crime is terrible, sir, but Mr. Steenhuisen won't admit to it, but he runs the Western Cape where I live. And the biggest murder rate is in the Cape Flats.
One of the highlights of the Oval Office visit is billionaire businessman Johan Rupert pointing out the high murder rate on the Cape Flats in the DA-led Western Cape. Steenhuisen claims Rupert apologized for his remarks, which may have been misconstrued.
He did send me a message afterwards, very generously, to say, look, he's hell of a sorry, it's not what he was trying to say. The point he was trying to make is that it's not only white people that are killed in South Africa, that it is coloured people in the Western Cape, on the Cape Flats. I don't think he was necessarily attacking the DA. It would be foolhardy to do so because there is no policing powers that the DA has in the Western Cape. The policing powers reside at national police level. And that's also why we're fighting so hard to have policing devolved to provincial and local government, because we do believe that the international best practice shows that when you devolve policing to a local level, it's far more effective and efficient.
President Cyril Ramaphosa gave a more light-hearted reflection of the ambush he experienced in the Oval Office. He told those gathered at the Infrastructure Development Conference on Monday that he too was bewildered by Donald Trump's antics.
So when I came in, I saw the room going a bit dark. They darkened the room. And for a moment, I wondered, what is this? It's happening to me again.
Excuse me, turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you.
Because at that moment, we were seated very nicely, and I was beginning to get into a groove of, interacting with this man. And I suddenly hear him say, no, dim the lights. And I must say, a number of people have said, this was an ambush. This was an ambush. And I was bemused. I was saying, what's happening?
From the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do.
Ramaphosa was also in the National Assembly on Tuesday, where he tried to explain the direction he and his cabinet will take the economy. But as Vuyo Mvoko reports, his question and answer session with MPs descended into chaos, ending abruptly.
Sergeant at Arms, please remove.
I'm raising a
honourable...
separate point here, Chair.
I have ruled no points of order while the President is now completing his
You're very impatient
answer.
today. I don't know why.
All too familiar sins, but which not too many may have expected this time around. It all started with the President outlining some of the orders that he has given his executive and what he hopes to achieve on the back of his working visit to the United States.
That's precisely what ministers in the GNU government are being directed to focus on, to reduce the regulatory burden. And all of us will admit that our country is overburdened with regulations. We've got tons and reams and, pages of regulations for everything. And I often say sometimes it was moving the pendulum from one end, which was apartheid, and we moved it all the way to wipe out the ravages of apartheid. And so the pendulum moved from left to right without resting in the middle.
EFF MP Umphile Mautwe was having none of it.
We saw you taking a trip to the US last week. And we are asking ourselves, what economic interventions are you trying to lock in? Because you are saying you went there to mend relations. How is your trip going to assist us, President?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time has expired.
And President, you dismally failed, Deputy Speaker, to finish, to protect the constitutional ruling that
Honourable
said
Member,
that
your
the kill the
time
Boer,
has
kill the farmer
expired.
chant is not,
Honourable Mautwe, your time has
doesn't constitute to hate
expired.
speech and does not incite
Honourable Mautwe,
violence. So,
Honourable
President,
Mautwe, I am now cautioning you.
From then on, things went south, with Mawutwe and several other EFF MPs either being shown the door or muted from the online platform.
Honourable Kola, please leave the chamber.
With less than 5 minutes before the 3-hour session ended, and without him answering all the questions, the head of the executive registered his unhappiness with some of the legislators.
I feel abused.
Deputy Speaker.
I really do feel
Honourable
abused.
members.
You didn't feel like that
Honourable
when
members,
Trump was
Honourable
abusing you in the
Matiase.
White House.
The legislator who presided over the chaotic scenes says the matter would definitely be addressed.
We will have to adjourn the House for the day, but I will refer this to the Speaker for further action. The House is now adjourned.
Staying with President Cyril Ramaphosa, a 28-year-old man appeared in the Cape Town Magistrates Court on Monday after threatening the head of state, Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis, and a company CEO. When we return, we'll tell you how far the SENDF's withdrawal is from the Eastern DRC. We also look at the internal factional battles within the MK party, both in Mpumalanga and in Parliament. There have been many moments when one thought the organization was imploding, but has that occasion arrived? Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned to Newzroom Africa on channel 405. The South African National Defence Force is racing against time to meet its own deadline for the total withdrawal of our troops from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Earlier this month, SANDF Chief Rudzani Mapwanya said all personnel, including equipment and artillery, will be out of the DRC and back in South Africa at the end of May. The troops were deployed in the DRC as a part of a SADC peacekeeping mission in 2023. But earlier this week, during the commemoration of International Peacekeepers Day at the De Brugge military base in Bloemfontein, Mapwanya seems to have backtracked on the initial deadline and was more cautious about giving an exact date for the completion of the process.
We are busy with the phased withdrawal of our forces from the Southern African Development Community Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which we call SAMI DRC. We are working around the clock with the SADC Secretariat to ensure that we get all our people and equipment back from the Eastern DRC. We are at the critical stage of this withdrawal. The contingent equipment of all the countries that had contributed troops and equipment, it's already at above 65% to the assembly area. I have promised our media that as soon as we embark on the personnel phase of the withdrawal, I will invite the willing journalists to the SADC assembly area to bear witness to that phase of withdrawal.
All doesn't seem to be well within the Umkhonto weSizwe party. If it's not the continuing divisions in Mpumalanga, it's the unceremonious removal of Mzwanele Manye as the party's chief whip in parliament. Mary Padi maintains that she's the rightful convener in the province of the Rising Sun, despite her party's decision not to support her as leader there. Speaking at a media briefing about the state of the organization in Mbombela, Padi described former public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane as an ordinary member. Here's Mweli Masilela with that report.
As the 2026 local government elections draw closer, the MK party's Mary Padi gave an update about the state of readiness to contest the elections. This briefing comes at a time when there is still confusion on who is the rightful convener of the party in Mpumalanga between Mary Padi and Busisiwe Mkhwebane. Padi was expelled by her party last year, but she was reinstated following a court order. She says Mkhwebane can't be considered the legitimate convener as she doesn't have an appointment letter.
Comrade Busisiwe Mkhwebane is just an ordinary member. There is no Comrade Busisiwe Mkhwebane yet until she is appointed.
Padi says they will wait for the party's higher structure to provide guidance.
The correct sequence was not followed in case of Mpumalanga. If you look at all the media briefings that were done under the SGO office, Comrade Floyd in KZN in Gauteng, he's been saying that Mpumalanga, they are still coming to introduce the structure. So if you are announced, you wait until you are given an appointment letter.
We have 3 by-elections in the province, 2 in Kanana, 1 in here, Sabi. So those by-elections is a barometer. It's not that we are saying we are going to win them, but we are going to measure our strength. That SMK is a new party within 14 months old, how many people that we are going to conquer the upcoming 2026 local elections.
Maripadi also used the media briefing to refute claims that there's been misuse of party funds under her leadership.
At the same time, early this week, in another of the many reshuffles within the MK party, Chief Whip Mzwanele Manyi was ousted unceremoniously. Manyi has now been replaced by former Joburg Council Speaker Colleen Makubele after receiving a letter from caucus leader Dr. John Hlophe, who removed him with immediate effect. Tensions between Hlophe and Manyi have been simmering in the background for months now after a physical confrontation between the two. On Tuesday afternoon, before an official statement of confirmation was released by the party, the National Assembly Speaker confirmed to the nation that Makubele has now taken over.
I would like to take this opportunity before the business of the House today to welcome the new designated Chief Whip of the opposition, the MK party, Ms. T.C. Makubele.
Both the Deputy President, who is the party leader in Parliament, and Mzwanele were able to have a system of systematic reporting about all the public representatives of Umkhonto weSizwe across board. But there was consideration, not because of any wrongdoing, that let us supplement the parliamentary caucus through the designation of Colleen Makubele as a chief whip. And that will add into the work of the organization. Mzwanele will be assigned different responsibilities within the National Assembly, and he will continue to excellently play a role as a public representative.
With all the internal ructions and zigzagging within the MK party that continue to play out in public, how should the supporters and potential voters interpret this? One moment there seems to be stability, and then the next, the game of musical chairs begins again.
I think part of the problem there is leaders not having elected positions but appointed to positions. What that does is it creates the impression among themselves as internal contestants that if one is able to make the right noises to Ubaba, they can be able to get their counterpart whom they do not agree with removed from their seat. Whereas in an elected party position, people accept that there's a particular term in which I have to live with the differences that I have against this particular individual. And there's nothing I can do that can get them to be fired in the short term. So we may as well find ways in which we can work together. And the MK party is preventing itself from having that benefit of security of elected leaders because of failure to now start working towards an elective conference.
That's a wrap from me this week. Stay tuned to Newzroom Africa for more news, views, and breaking news. But for now, it's goodbye. Thanks for watching.